Once again, I'm going to come with $1 million idea right out of the gates. And it gets even better for Dani Sureck and Darren Urban because, once again, Paulie Podcast is just too darn lazy, too darn indolent, to use a big word, to actually make it happen. So I'll let you guys take the idea and run with it. And it has a lot to do with Darren over here. He's in agony, and you think it's because of my intro to Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation. It's not really. He's still dealing with withdrawals from the draft simulator. And so I'm thinking, what about a schedule simulator? Dani Sureck, I put it to you. What if you used all that same software and you tried to simulate an NFL team's schedule instead of their draft class, all 17 games?
Oof, that's a lot when you start taking into account who they're playing and all the other teams that they're playing. That's too much math for my liking.
Do we have a thing on the simulator where that says, okay, you can't have the stadium this day because the Rolling Stones are coming through? Like, do we have that?
I would give us every international game.
Well, it depends on,
Almost every international game.
You just, see, there you go. That would be Dani's. See, right there, there's
Not
different
everyone, but
angles.
almost.
There's different angles. She'd be going to Brazil. She'd be going to Germany. She'd be going to London.
And then when she went on vacation, she just sit in her apartment because she's done everything already.
Of course, the simulator wouldn't give you the benefit of doing Germany and London back-to-back. You'd have to come back to the States to do separate road trips. Then all of a sudden, you wouldn't be so in love with that schedule.
Why would you have to go back?
That's what I'm saying. The draft simulator wouldn't comply with that.
Oh, I see.
Wouldn't grant you every wish, just like you couldn't
No, we were talking about this a little in the office the other day, a few of us, of just like a gut feeling of not knowing whether or not the Cardinals are going to open up their season on the road or at home. But for the home opener, who would it be? And my gut, I mean, not super. I really don't think it would be Chicago with Caleb Williams. For some reason, I don't know Chicago's schedule. I would imagine they probably want to open up at home. So for me, assuming that like week 1 home opener, for some reason, I feel like it could be a back-to-back year of going up against Washington. That's like a weird gut feeling I have.
Because if you were to do a power poll of revenge games, NFL.com right now has the top 10 revenge games. For example, Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh going against Denver, right?
Okay.
Just like a year ago.
I don't have that much against Jaden Daniels after he left ASU, Paul.
You need to go a little deeper into that roster, beyond the players to, the offensive coordinator and former longtime head coach of the Arizona Cardinals,
Yes.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Yes.
So that
I don't know. That's just one of my gut feelings. Because we know it's not going to be Aaron Rodgers and the Jets because that's already been leaked of
yes,
the 49ers.
That is true. You're right. Those early games were already leaked, and so we'll see. And look, by the time a lot of people consume this, the schedule might be out.
Right, because Wednesday at 5 o'clock Arizona time.
I'll just say this much. I was reminded, and I'll pose this as a Paulie Pop quiz here off the top, of the 100 most watched broadcasts last year, how many were sports out of the 100? And for bonus points, how many of those were NFL telecasts?
Isn't it like
sports? I'm going to say like 98 of those were sports.
I think 98. I think is the
correct answer is 96.
Okay.
Ooh.
How many of those were NFL telecasts?
94?
92 is the correct answer.
Okay.
The 6
Dang, I would
non-NFL
have lost on
broadcasts.
Price is Right. I went over.
The only 2 non-sports broadcasts, well, actually, and wait, where? Yep. So it was Thanksgiving Day Parade was one. The Oscars was another. And then you had Ohio State versus Michigan, which is actually higher rated than any other college football telecast. SEC Championship was rated ahead of the National Championship, and then the Men's National Championship for college basketball, as Darren does yours truly a solid with the gravity actually won out in my phone charger right there as it's plugged in underneath.
No wonder he doesn't have an Apple iPhone because his Apple computer is a pain in the butt.
So there you go. We have people who do that, Darren. Don't worry about it.
Darren
namely
is those
me.
people.
Yeah, namely me. So there's that. And then I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember where we were going with this afterwards.
Sorry.
By the way, you know what was interesting? Kyle Vandenbosch was in here for the Red Sea Report talking about the schedule. The first thing that every former or current player does when they look at the schedule is what?
The bye.
The bye week, yes.
The second thing's got to be taxes. No.
How many different states?
Oh, they're gonna pay a crap ton of those.
Yeah.
And they already know what taxes they're gonna pay. They just don't know when.
Well, at least there's no state tax in Florida this year, so that's
Woohoo.
good. So there you go.
That's right, the bye week.
That's the bonus on that one.
I can't foresee the league giving the Cardinals 3 straight years of the final possible bye week in December.
It was week 14 last year.
Of little faith there, Dani.
And week 13 the year before. So, yes, that has been a persistent theme. There's no doubt about it. And in terms of primetime games, now, once again, the schedule most likely might be out, we should say, upon the consumption of this. But in terms of primetime games, you guys are still sticking with 2. I'm going with 3. That's the forecast over here. You guys feel good about that from last year.
Paul knows something.
All right. Just saying over there. I tell you what, we'll get back to the schedule in a minute. Let's just get to what everybody wants to know about, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. Come on. You guys saw him out there during the early parts of the first rookie minicamp practice. First impressions, Dani.
He knows how to stretch.
He's got a great bucket hat, Paul.
That's all we saw in last Friday's rookie minicamp. For the time the media was allowed to be out there, was the rookies were literally just learning how to stretch in terms of when the whole team is out there, what the order of the stretch is, what they should be doing. That was all we got to see.
This is a play-by-play that I was not expecting.
Yes, we did learn. Much to, I would assume, nobody's surprise, that it doesn't appear like Harrison is going to be on special teams, because as the media was leaving, that was the last thing we saw was grouped off into special teams. You saw the linemen, working on some drills, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. was over by himself with his position coach and Drew Terrell catching some passes.
Yeah,
that's what I learned at Friday's practice. We will see more when we get a chance to go to OTAs next week, because rookies and vets will be together. So looking forward to that.
And the Drew Terrell work with Marvin Harrison, which I got a little bit on video, is actually being used by a certain 4-letter sports network.
Really?
Big time, Darren.
Wow. They reached out to me.
Yeah.
How much is your autograph for these days?
No, it's worth quite a bit, Dani. They're actually out there together this week. They don't have helmets on. They're probably not doing a ton. Because they're still in phase 2, which is the helmetless, can't go offense versus defense yet. But next week, it's all going to come together, helmets and practice kind of maybe.
All right, let's get serious here. All right, let's advance past stretching and bucket hats and Calvisi consulting idiotic ideas that'll never come to fruition. I want your thoughts on the receiver room as it stands right now. I'm going to go through them because there's quite a few. There's quantity. Is there enough quality? Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Zay Jones, Greg Dortch, Zach Pascal, Chris Moore, and then you have Jeff Smith, Andre Bocelli, Daniel Arias, Dan Chisena, Tajon Palmer, and Xavier Weaver, the latter 2 late-round and undrafted rookie receivers. Is that enough, Dani? Or, like the addition of Zay Jones, do you think this is a position group they continue to monitor and or potentially add to?
Both. I don't necessarily see additions happening to this room for the rest of the offseason unless you start making cuts in training camp and somebody becomes available. And that's what I mean by both is this is absolutely a position, which, they say they're going to do for every position, but absolutely you're going to want to monitor what's going on around the league and who's going to become available. I don't foresee another signing similar to one of Zay Jones, of that type of veteran, of what the Cardinals would bring in. In terms of quality over quantity, when you go through that list, to me, I think of it being a pretty similar list you would imagine to last year in terms of active roster or practice squad. It is interesting, though, of you bring in Chris Moore and you bring in Zay Jones and just how they've been used in their career. I mean, they're both big, physically big receivers. Zay Jones seems like he will be higher on the depth chart just immediately stepping in and the experience that he has. So it'll be interesting to see if this is going to end up being the final group or close to the final group as we get through, near the end of training camp in a couple of months. You can tell that they like the size. I think it's still a clear number 1 and number 2 of Harrison and Michael Wilson. It's just a matter of figuring out who that number 3 is going to be, which right now seems like it would be Zay Jones. But look, that's one of the more exciting groups, in my opinion, throughout training camp every year, are the receivers and who stands out. And if someone like a Tajon Palmer, who is big, and he's not just tall, I mean, he is broad. He is strong. You can see that in him. If he's a good special teamer, is that a competition for someone like a Zach Pascal, right? Like there are going to be competitions like that. I don't know how much competition there's going to be in terms of, 1, 2, 3 right now of your depth.
I don't know if there's going to be. I mean, to me, I don't think they add anybody else. I think they're going to run with these guys, barring an injury. But I think these are the guys that, because to me, Zay Jones is that last veteran piece that you bring in to say, okay, we need a veteran. But again, to me, at some point, there becomes a law of diminishing returns. If you bring in another veteran, you're either saying, we have a veteran here that we overestimated, or one of these young guys hasn't done it yet. And they haven't even looked at their young guys, and we know how they feel about Michael Wilson. So I think this is your wide receiver room, and then you go from there. What to me is interesting is, where does Greg Dortch fit into this, if at all? Because to me, Xavier Weaver is now a guy who goes head-to-head with Greg Dortch as a possible return man. Is DJ Dallas of enough of a return man? Is Dortch about returning, or is he about receiving? And if he's about receiving, do we like him well enough in the slot? Because we basically announced to the world, with all the size we've added at wide receiver, that we don't want it on the outside. Or do you want a bigger receiver on the inside as well? This is going to be one of the more fascinating camp battle situations that we have.
And that's our segue. You look at the dozen names that we just rattled off in that receiver room. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2
we would
are under 6 feet tall. Only 2 are
Dortch and Bocelli.
Yep. So remember we talked about after the draft about the current decision makers, Monti Ossenfort, Jonathan Gannon, and what we know, the known and unknown. We know, A, they're all about acquiring players who are serious about the game of football, all ball. Number 2, what did we cite? They believe it's a big man's game. And if you look at the way they've constructed the roster, this receiver room in particular, they have definitely changed the height and weight component of the receiver room. Kyle Vandenbosch pointed this out. This is NFL Communications, a piece of intel they put out at the beginning of last season. And it was about the size and weight of every NFL roster on opening day 2023. And in the NFC, the Cardinals had the most players under 200 pounds and the most players under 6 feet tall. 10 players under 200 pounds, 11 players under 6 feet tall on the opening day roster. Something tells me opening day 2024, they will not be first in either category, because by design, they have gone about building a roster where all of a sudden Greg Dortch and Andre Bocelli really stand out for just being so different in terms of body type of everyone else in that room. Now, does that end up being to Dortch's benefit? Perhaps. It depends. But yeah, the competition is going to be extremely real, especially considering he goes back to the previous administration, right? And so I am curious to see how this all comes out, because when you see some of the graphics that were out there on Twitter about look at all the weapons at the disposal of Kyler Murray, and it's pretty dang impressive, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, James Conner. And then you can even go, a Trey Benson now behind Conner, a Tip Ryman potentially, if he's able to give you both components right away. But then how deep do you go in this receiver room? Because last year you didn't get much of anything out of Zach Pascal in terms of the passing game. Where is Chris Moore? Where is Jeff Smith in terms of going beyond just being special teamers and blocking receivers? So I guess, to me, that's where Greg Dortch, I think, could stick and stay on this roster, is because I think he's going to separate himself in terms of being, A, a pass catcher, and then B, yards after catch.
Why didn't that happen last year?
Zach Pascal and Chris Moore? Or Zach Pascal, that is?
Greg Dortch.
Well, it did in December and January.
Okay, but
I mean, he finally got some reps. He finally got some targets, and he produced.
Because guys were hurt.
Yeah.
Like, What makes you think he's going to emerge enough that he will get the attention?
I would argue at the end of last season, after he proved what he did in December and January, if everyone had been healthy for a game 18, Dortch still would have been in the rotation.
Okay.
Dortch still would. I in my mind, did he have to go above and beyond to prove himself? Maybe because he wasn't hand selected by these decision makers, or because of his size, yeah. Or maybe it was that, quote, inconsistent play where they couldn't quite trust him for whatever reason in terms of his knowledge of the offense or playbook. There was just sort of a trace of that in the way the head coach spoke about him.
I understand what you're saying. I guess ultimately, and we don't need to belabor this one point, but I'm going to belabor this one point. Like you said, if everybody's healthy, he's still in the mix. Then who wasn't in the mix that was here last year? Rondale?
Yes. I mean, at the
Hollywood?
beginning of the year, Rondale Moore was most definitely ahead of Greg Dortch on the depth chart. But by the end of the year, was that the case?
You're right. But my point is, Rondale's not here anymore.
Right.
Like, who is Greg Dortch playing above? He's not playing above Marvin. He's not playing above Michael Wilson. I don't think you offer a deal, and I don't think it's worth completely $4 million or whatever it was, because that's probably got incentives in it. But I don't think you offer what Zay Jones got, and Zay Jones comes here over multiple teams if Zay Jones isn't going to play over him. So who's he playing over?
No, that's where I have him slotted, as a fourth receiver. Greg Dortch is a fourth receiver. That's exact. I have him ahead of Zach Pascal. I have him ahead of Chris Moore. Everyone else in that list, Andre Bocelli.
Yeah, but how often
Jeff
are they going to
Smith.
use a fourth receiver? Like, to me,
because you still have Trey McBride.
Yeah, I don't.
And how often
and if
they
you're
like to
running
have-
two tight ends a bunch,
Right.
I mean, they went empty quite a bit. You know, I'm just saying that they showed any and every formation.
we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, for example, when we talk about, you know, what the offense can be, and that's a natural line of thinking when you see the new weapons. Okay, what is this offense? What's going to be the DNA, the identity of this offense? Last year, they were a top 5 run team, but I still pose the question, was that out of necessity or by design? You have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Zay Jones, right? Michael Wilson in year 2. Trey McBride was a much different player by the end of last season than he was at the beginning of the season. Are you still going to be as run-heavy an offense? Because the best coaches adapt to their personnel, and they're going to maximize their weapons. You have a lot more receiving threats to start this year than you ever did last year.
True.
Not to
You
mention
also
you
have-
have your franchise quarterback.
That
right?
was going to be
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
It will be interesting. It does seem like it is a more well-rounded receiving core. And again, having Kyler Murray at the helm of it all completely changes every aspect of this offense. I would still imagine this is going to be a run-heavy scheme. And I would still imagine that they're still going to have Kyler under center, and they're still going to rely on the play action. Having the quality out wide that they will have consistently throughout what we're expected to see throughout the depth chart is just going to provide more opportunities and more options for them to not be so one-dimensional. I would still imagine they're going to use James Conner in a similar role the way that they did. I would imagine they're still going to want to run first, but we'll see. I do think it was, though, out of necessity to a certain extent last year, because until really McBride had the opportunity to really blossom, because he started the year behind Zach Ertz. And then it was when Kyler came back that connection really took off. Up until that point, it was really James Conner was your only true consistent weapon offensively, where you knew you could hand the ball to him, especially if you were in the red zone. And it seemed like that would, that was the most safe way to go. I feel like they're going to have a lot more options on a consistent basis this year. I still think they're going to be a run-first offense. What
do you think, Darren? Do you think? I mean, you were 4th in rushing, 2nd in yards per carry, number 1 in 20-plus yard runs last year.
Well, again, I kind of go back and forth. I do think some of what they did last year was a byproduct of knowing what their defense was and wasn't. And you want to play keep away a little bit more because you don't want your defense on the field, because you know if you're playing some kind of basketball on grass that it's going to be a problem with it eventually catches up to you. But I also agree with Dani. I think ultimately I think there's the physical nature of what they want to do, the fact they drafted Tip Ryman, the fact that both Monti and JG, when you get them down to boil it all down, if they had to pick the two spots that they would address first all the time, it would be the offensive and defensive line. I think ultimately, I do think they're going to be run first. I mean, it's all relative. You're going to have weapons. You got to make sure Marvin Harrison, who you just picked number 4 overall, is a weapon. You have to make sure Trey McBride is a pass-catching weapon. But they did draft Trey Benson, and they did upgrade the offensive line, and James Conner had his best season. And I think ultimately, the play-action game can really benefit Kyler Murray, given his size when he's throwing the ball. I think all of that leads back into, yes, we would like to run the ball quite a bit. I'm not saying, obviously, they're going to need 4 receivers at a time. But if you, for example, right now, if you're talking to me about who could end up being a more important person in this offense, is it, let's say, Greg Dortch is a 4th receiver, or let's say Michael Carter is a 3rd running back, or Trey Benson is a 3rd running back, I'm going to go with a running back, because I think ultimately those guys are going to end up, both because of attrition and because of how they're going to play the game, those guys are going to end up being more important.
I mean, the first thing I might be looking at with Trey Benson when they actually put the pads on is his pass protection. Because remember last year, they used Amari DiMercato as that 3rd down back a lot. And James Conner, I think, sometimes came to the sideline and he was yearning to still be out there. But no, that was Drew Petzing's plan. He wanted that 3rd down back. And once Amari DiMercato proved as an undrafted rookie that he was reliable in pass protection, okay, he earned a spot. So for everything that we know Trey Benson can do when they give him the ball, what can he do in terms of keeping his quarterback upright, keeping his QB clean? And if indeed he's able to handle that aspect of the job, then the competition is on him and DiMercato for that 3rd down back. Especially if he can catch the ball, like everyone says, that Trey Benson is a real threat. And we know he's the home run hitter with his speed and all those stats about how many chunk touchdowns he finished and all that at Florida State and Oregon. So, I mean, that all plays into things. There's no doubt about it. The other thing I wonder, and this is me just trying to calculate what's possible and the potential of this offense, is just year 2 of any scheme. Forget about the fact you didn't have Kyler all of last offseason, and you do this offseason, and that's a big deal. Big deal. But the fact that it's year 2 in a scheme, and so you're not just installing the basics, but you have the fundamentals and the foundation in place. And so much of the basics that you had to install and refresh everyone's memory on this time a year ago, that's all in place once you get past rookie minicamp.
Well, when you say basics, what do you mean by that? Because ultimately you've got so many new players on your team, it doesn't matter who was here last year. I get having Kyler around all season, but what? It's just because Gannon's been here doesn't mean there's not enough players that you need to kind of start from ground zero.
For example, when Kyler goes up to the line of scrimmage, 4/5 of the offensive line was here last year, right? So, Jonah Williams, 3/5. So Jonah Williams got to get on board, but he's a veteran. I'm just saying you're so far ahead of the learning curve than you were a year ago at this time in terms of the scheme. Then what else is possible is my question. Because if the NFL comes down to a handful of plays every game, and it's the little things that decide every game, then all of a sudden, okay, maybe a new wrinkle in the playbook that you couldn't really rely on or access a year ago is now at your disposal this year. What does that mean in terms of added production?
Yeah, I think, too, it gives Kyler the ability to really hone in on the plays he liked and didn't like that I would imagine are not as easy to adjust when he is coming back the way he did last year of season is halfway through and you have only so much time on the field during a week in between games and all of that stuff, that now he has a full off season to really tweak some of those plays that he liked or even didn't like what can be done differently, really make sure he's even more comfortable with the change of footwork that this staff asked of him. I think too while they might not be, running specific plays and it might just be more general routes, the fact that we've seen on social media Kyler out with his receivers in the offseason on their own time, which is not something new, right? This is what quarterbacks do every offseason, even if they're not posting about it. But that's another big part of having him healthy is not just the scheme, but being able to create that chemistry that he was just unable to have with his receivers last year. Again, because Trey McBride was not his number one tight end. Michael Wilson was a rookie. And so having Kyler healthy and participating in these off-season programs, which again are still voluntary at this point, and he has been here every day, I believe, because we're not in there to take head count, but I'm pretty sure he's been here every day.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of anybody who hasn't been here, to be honest. I mean, not that I'm taking a head count. It's funny though. As long as Kyler's leading a football offense, we're all good. Because then I saw the TikTok he posted where he and James Conner were trying to talk Paris Johnson Jr. through some batting cage swings.
I didn't see that.
And Paris is awful, and I don't know if he's ever been taught why his back foot kept swinging around as he swung. I don't know, but there was a couple Kyler finally laughed a little bit. But at first, he looked like he was genuinely irritated that Paris couldn't hit the ball. It was pretty funny. Come on, man. What are you doing? Just hit the ball.
Did they dial down the velo a little bit so Paris had a better chance?
I couldn't really tell how it was. But it was, let's just put it this way, Paris was brutal. Paris as a batter, James Conner is Steph Curry as a basketball shooter compared to Paris as a batter. And if you saw what James Conner did in his little video at the playoff game, you know where the bar is set.
That was going to be my next question. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, Kyler's swing, though. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah, well.
Oh, boy. Okay. And then you're reminded, okay, he's the one and only athlete to ever get drafted in the first round of both the NFL and Major League Baseball draft. And once again, I've told this story before. It was the day after he arrived, and we did a one-on-one interview as he was a rookie, 2019. I asked, hey, you going to go play some golf with your Hall of Fame receiver? He said, nope. My dad never let me play golf because it would mess with my baseball swing. And so growing up, he never played golf. And you saw the baseball swing as he's rocketing.
He probably would have been a pretty good golfer, though.
He's rocketing tanks
all
all over the yard.
He could probably go start playing golf right now and then be one of the best golfers on the team by the end of the summer. Yeah. Just how competitive he is and how athletic he is.
I want to know, if we got him in the trust tree right now, we got him on the lie detector, Kyler, how many fastballs did it take for you to get dialed in? Because when you don't pick up a bat for 3 years or whatever he said it was, and then you're just starting to rifle line drives all over how long did it take you actually get your eye back in the cage? That's so anyway, I mentioned this with Craig Grillo on the Red Sea Report.
Craig Grillo, isn't he 50 years old today?
Is it the big 5-0? I did not realize that.
I believe it is the big 5-0.
There's
Happy birthday, Craig.
There's Hawaii 5-0 and there's Grillo 5-0. Okay, I did not know that.
Any jokes we should rattle off like he tried to do when I had a big milestone birthday a few months ago?
Yeah, that's good.
Now I should have been more prepared.
You got a microphone
really
right there, Dan.
I know, I wasn't prepared. I didn't realize he was turning so old today.
That's good. So there was a guy.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, there was a fantasy football guy who tweeted out after seeing, just the entirety of Kyler's offseason so far. And there's so many different little, whether it's him practicing and throwing to the construction worker or the baseball or the basketball or whatever, and him saying he's more locked in than he's ever been or more than any other quarterback right now, whatever.
We're lucky there's always cameras wherever he is.
And the guy tweeted out, quote, hope y'all bought the dip on Kyler Murray. And I'm like, that's a pretty good line, right? Pretty good. I bought the dip, stock market. His stock was low.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he doesn't chew.
Because he was a former 2-time Pro Bowler, and then with the injury and everything, and then, the demise of the offense and the team in 22.
What is the saying you like to say, Paul?
So,
what do you like to say?
He likes to say a lot of things, but...
A 2023 dip for a...
Well, it was 2023 dip for a 2024 rip is what it is. Yes, that is what it is.
Danny didn't want to have to do it.
I didn't want to do a disservice.
Dave, have you seen the movie
Probably not.
Dumb Money on Netflix? Came out last year.
I never even heard
about
of it.
Roaring Kitty. Do you know Roaring Kitty?
Yes, I'm aware of this. Is this the
GameStop meme stock craze? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Roaring Kitty was back.
I do know
this
what
week.
GameStop is.
He
I used to go there
for the first time.
Yeah, posted, and the stock rocketed, and the short sellers took a bath, just like in the movie 3
just
years
the
ago.
other day?
Just this week, yes, already happened, yes. So it just
why is that stock still around?
That's what the short sellers are wondering, Darren. That's exactly what they're wondering, and they've lost their shirt, wagering that it would not be around.
But I don't know what any of this means.
It's a stock market rebellion by the ham and eggers, the masses, who refuse to let it go bankrupt because then the man would win.
Oh,
that
yeah.
kind of thing.
Don't want the man to win.
Yeah, so
should I go buy GameStop
or the woman?
Stock?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? I should go get GameStop stock?
I was thinking there was some sort of parallel to the whole Kyler Murray offseason, and but that fizzled. I should have just. We'll edit that out later again.
Yeah, we want to edit out any references to short selling Kyler. That wouldn't be very fair.
That's easy.
Come on now.
But the one part of that bonding trip, whatever you want to call it, with his teammates,
yes,
is you're reminded. At least I needed a reminder. He's 26 and has his own statue. I mean, that should not go unnoticed, right? I mean, the man has his own statue.
When you look at the photo that he took, so he's not in it. So obviously he's got to be the one taking the picture. And there's something, hey, I'd like 5 of my friends and teammates to go stand in front of my statue so I can take a picture of them with my statue.
Because we all know it's poor form to stand in front of your own statue. Thou shalt not take a selfie in front of your own statue. I mean, that would be gauche and pretentious.
I'm just curious. All the people who were upset that Gannon and Ossenfort and some of the coaches went to the unveiling last early April before the draft, are they upset that Kyler's teammates were there in the offseason instead of training on the field?
You misspoke. When you said all the people, you mean one person in particular who has a blog, a national blog?
That's a good troll, though. I like that. That is a good reminder. A little scoreboard right there.
Just wondering.
Okay.
Although I did think, and I'm certainly not trying to, but I keep thinking to myself, I would be a little bummed if I wasn't one of the guys invited. That was a good trip.
Yes.
I'm curious.
Go to an NBA game. Go take some batting practice. Go hang out with the big man on campus at Oklahoma.
So do they not get their feelings hurt when they're all at the same basketball game, but only Kyler and James are courtside?
No. Oh, I got one thing to add to this, by the way.
Because I do have a question based on that game. Can I ask her real quick?
Yeah, go ask that first.
Is he a fan of the Mavericks since he's a Dallas guy or an OKC fan?
I don't understand why that's a question. Yes, he's from Dallas. He's a Dallas fan, and he went to school in Norman, not Oklahoma City.
Yeah, but if a state puts my statue up, I'm going to follow that team.
But the state didn't. The school did.
No, it was for the Mavs, 100%.
Speaking of the school.
Which won that game.
And we can have Dani bring Caitlin on at any point. But this is the dumbest thing ever. They call it OU.
Yes, University.
But it's University of Oklahoma. What kind of?
That's the. Never mind.
I don't have much good things to say about that. I'm not going to say anything about the
school where our franchise quarterback went to on air. I'll tell you off air how I feel about that.
Well, it's because they don't want to.
I think you can tell how I feel about it.
They don't want to risk getting confused with the superior UO, which is Oregon. So you don't want to get that's they have to separate themselves, brand themselves different. It's sort of like South Carolina.
Wasn't Oklahoma?
They can't go by USC because there already is a USC. So you have to figure out a different way to market it. Correct?
I don't know. I've got a good friend who went to Appalachian State, and he always tells me how that's the real ASU.
Exactly.
I want to punch him in the face.
Right. That's state ASU football right now. You don't want any smoke from App State right now.
Point.
I'll just leave you with that. Okay, so Kyler is a Mavericks fan, yet he was sitting front row at the OKC game. So,
well,
all right.
who were the Thunder playing?
I mean, he's
the Mavs.
I know.
So it's not just a Thunder game he was sitting courtside at. He actually traveled to watch the Mavs, which would make him a bigger Mavs fan.
So
I feel like Danny's getting angry again
because they were conspicuous as the only ones not wearing the T-shirt, the OKC blue
That's
T-shirt.
True, they weren't.
So that was,
although James Conner did have
the wide shot,
Kyler Murray jersey, Oklahoma jersey on.
Right, so he was playing to the locals. But Kyler's like, hey, I'm a made man. I got my own statue. I might be a Mavs fan. I'm going to sit here.
I feel like Paul's obsessed with the statue.
No one's going to touch me on that one. By the way, if you do bring Caitlin in, I need to give her a sincere thank you because she saved my keister on Mother's Day.
Our team photographer who went to OU.
She gave me a good gift idea that I turned into a money Mother's Day gift. It was such a good idea. I sent it to my wife, my own mother, and my mother-in-law. So that's how good it was.
You're going to have to help me off the air here, Paul. You can't just keep this stuff to yourself.
Well, Mother's Day's already passed, Darren.
Yeah, well, there's going to be another one. Yeah. Trust me.
Oh, there'll be another one, Darren. Every year. There's at least 5 every year. There's Mother's Day, there's anniversary, there's Christmas, there's birthday, and there's Valentine's Day. 5 a year.
True.
Year after year. And I don't have enough gift ideas in me. I'm just a simple man. How can I come up with enough gift ideas year after year?
This is a fair point, and I'm also in the gauntlet because I have Mother's Day and then my anniversary and then my wife's birthday are all in like a 3-week period, and I'm like, this is not good.
Yeah, you're gonna have to outsource that. You need to bring in some.
You should have planned your wedding better, Darren.
Oh, how about that? Wow.
Fair.
Okay. You guys are getting to know each other pretty well now. She's weighing in on that topic. I'll just leave you on that one right there.
Well, since Dani wasn't born when I got married, she wasn't around to ask at the time.
It's true.
She was born.
Okay. So
it was close.
let's see. If
Really, really close.
This is my segue into camp battles, because one camp battle will definitely be Darren versus Dani. Beyond that, where do you see camp battles? Because it's never too early to talk about position battles. I don't care if it's only May. Obviously, left guard. And, I mean, there are a number of contenders at left guard, right? Here we go. Isaiah Adams, the rookie, round 3. Elijah Wilkinson, who was the starter when healthy last year, right?
Yes.
Evan Brown, who started every game at center for the Seahawks, or 16 out of 17 a year ago, has played right guard with Detroit just 2 years ago in 2022. Yelda Froholt could be a potential left guard if ... Who starts at center, Dani?
How about my good friend John Gaines?
Exactly. Yes. His middle name is Need to Know. You're on a need to know
Pounding the
basis on that one. So, and by the way, your good friend, my good friend, even though not sure I've actually ever talked to him, I'm just an admirer from afar, is Big Mo. I'm putting Marquise Hayes into the left guard competition, mainly because I've identified him on the watch list for the Paulie Pigskin breakout player at camp 2 years running.
I give him this.
You know what?
Paul keeps going all in with Marquise Hayes.
I'm throwing Big Mo into the mix. He's in there.
Did he also go to OU?
He did. You're right. So
honestly, the only as close to a guarantee as we can have at this point in May of a starting spot for an O lineman is Will Hernandez as your right guard. Do we even have confirmation that Jonah Williams is going to be on the left side and Paris Johnson Jr. is going to be your right tackle?
So there was a conversation that I had with a couple of our cohorts this morning. Why is it locked that Will Hernandez is the right guard and not the left guard?
It's not.
Well, you just said it was.
I said the closest we had, actually, if we could replay that.
Court stenographer, can you read that back to us, please?
And I say that because when there have been, since Hernandez has been here, when there have been opportunities or need because of adversity on the left and the right side, he has consistently stayed on the right side.
That's true.
So that's why I'm keeping him on the right side for this exercise.
Even though I think his first 4 years in the league as a
Was
second
on the
round
left
pick for the
side.
Giants, it was all on the left side, right?
Well, because
so if that's a thing, right? If there's such a strong connection with Hernandez and Johnson on the right side, and they want to move Paris over to the left, does that mean you move Will to the left?
And that's why we were talking about it. That's actually how that part of it came up. We were talking about Paris switching over.
Right. Does that have a
talking about
trickle
how tight
down
they were
effect?
with Will, and maybe Will could move over to the left side. Who knows?
Yeah. So I guess maybe I changed my mind. Maybe all 5 starting positions are up for grabs. Up for maybe shifting around.
I think Yilda's your center.
I do too. I just think there was enough of a connection between the quarterback and the center last year. You don't want to mess that up.
Right.
Unless somehow John Gaines is some sort of phenom.
He was working well as the number 2. I'm just curious with the flexibility and where he's at in his rehab. That's all I want to know, Paul.
Okay.
How's he doing?
Once again, the first padded
I bet
practice.
she has full range of motion when you talk about flexibility at this point.
Dani, you only have to wait till about August 7th or 8th. That's about it. And then, you might begin to get an answer. Maybe.
So
we'll
3
see.
months.
We'll see.
Well, we're not going to get an answer on the starting lineup until the regular season, we've been told already.
So other position battles then, as we see them, the number 2 running back we've already identified, the battle behind James Conner. Okay. Beyond that, obviously cornerback.
Well, you forgot our heated discussion about fourth receiver. We don't need to go with that.
Fourth
again,
receiver,
but
we
we're
already
there.
identified that. Yes,
Okay.
indeed. We don't need to go back beyond the top 2 tight ends. So I'm now officially flipping to defense.
Okay, that's fine.
Cornerback.
Cornerback is the big one, right?
So, look, I'm just going to put Max Melton in there. It's his job to lose, alongside Sean Murphy-Bunting. Does anyone have a problem with that?
No.
Okay. So we have that because Garrett Williams is your nickel right now. We'll see how Rabbit does and what that means exactly. He could definitely make some noise and some inroads. We'll see. But if he does, then I'm guessing maybe Garrett Williams enters the mix as an outside corner, perhaps. So now
You also have Elijah Jones, who's a third-round pick. I mean, it's not like that guy
True.
was like a
No, you're right.
sixth-round pick.
You're right. Absolutely.
No offense, Keetro Clark.
He's sort of an unknown, sort of under the radar. You're right. He hasn't got nearly the same amount of publicity.
What about outside linebacker? Right? I mean, you've got, what if Xavier Thomas, the rookie, has a great offseason in training camp? Are we said it's going to be Zaven Collins and B.J. Ojulari?
I think it is. Now, whether that's true on rundowns, I guess we're going to have to see. I think there's, again, because of the rotations that they have both on the defensive line and outside linebacker, I think you could use. I mean, Zaven Collins played the most out of any outside linebacker last year, and he didn't even get to 60% of the snaps. And that's because they're rotating so much, and I do think that's going to make a difference.
I mean, if you're saying that Xavier Thomas could end up with a sub package and obvious passing downs, yeah, I think that could be if he comes in day one as a 6-year college guy, right at 24 years of age, and he starts making offensive linemen in camp looking stupid in the one-on-one pass rush drills. Absolutely. Kyle Vandenbosch talked at length about that, former 3-time Pro Bowl edge rusher, that, when it comes to certain positions that you can plug and play from college to the pros, running back would be one, maybe receiver, although that has been a bit of a learning curve. But edge rusher, I mean, if you have the speed and the skill set to get past a tackle, then go at it. You just stick him out there, and his only responsibility, all you have to do is come off the ball and get after the quarterback, if it's an obvious passing situation. And for everyone who says Xavier Thomas might be a liability against the run, I mean, B.J. Ojulari, that wasn't exactly his strong suit coming out of LSU. So when it comes to setting the edge and defending the run, I'm curious to see how that battle might play out. Because Zaven Collins, that is something he does really well at his size and his weight. And now, okay. And then Dennis Gardeck. We had this discussion, too. I threw it out with Kyle Vandenbosch. And all right, you bolster the interior D-line. How much can that help the outside guys? And he made the point, this is Kyle Vandenbosch now, Paul, you cited my 3 Pro Bowls. Well, guess what? The only 3 times I went to a Pro Bowl is when I had a dominant interior defensive tackle. Twice with Albert Hainsworth, and the other one, oh boy. I forget.
Sue? Did he play with Sue?
Ndamukong Suh. Thank you, Darren.
You're welcome, Paul.
So I was going to throw out like Jeffrey Simmons, not even close to his playing era. That's modern day. So I thought, he immediately paid props to those inside guys, freeing up the outside guys. Because as he explains, a lot of times you run into a freebie. If there's interior pressure and the quarterback's flushed out, a lot of times he runs right into your arms, and you just get a freebie.
I mean, it seems like the staff.
Tell me we're going to clip that. That alone out of context will be fascinating. Thank you.
It does seem like this front office had the same idea when you're looking at early and big priorities of this offseason with free agents and the defensive line and Darius Robinson, their second first-round pick this year out of the great University of Missouri. We've talked about this of, the rush and cover go hand in hand and the trickle-down effect of you can't completely overhaul a team in 1 year. It's not realistic. And I do feel like it makes the most sense what they've been doing, which is really prioritizing the rush and coverage right now in free agency and the draft, because you can have a trickle-down effect when it comes to that pass rush and your outside linebackers when you've got a beefed-up D-line that can consistently stop the run and also create some interior pressure. And I think that's really going to bode well for the improvements that this defense needs to make this year.
By the way, B.J. Ojulari, they list him at 6'2", 248. Xavier Thomas, 6'2", 244, but he told us in the Big Red Rage last week that he was over 250.
Oof.
So, similar body type.
I did like Xavier Thomas talked to the media Tuesday, and it was asked, and you can tell he's serious. He's what we've heard the staff is looking for in players, right? Very serious about ball, didn't crack a smile. I know you said the same, Paul, when Thomas was on the Big Red Rage in his interview, but it was asked something along the lines of what would surprise people about you that they wouldn't know. And he said, I'm a pretty nice person, which is funny because when you look at him, I mean, he can be intimidating. He is big and he is broad and he's got tattoos. He's got a big neck tattoo. And right, like he said, when I'm on the field, like I'm not calm, like I'm not polite. But when I'm off the field, I'm a pretty nice guy. And I thought that was pretty funny that was the first thing that came to mind for something that would surprise people.
And Isaiah Adams said something along the same lines, didn't he?
Yeah.
Except he said it with a smile on his face that, hey, I'm
pretty polite.
Yeah, I'm pretty polite. He said, ... He waited for effect, said, but on the field, I try and kill people. And he smiled some more.
Pardon my language, but I want to kill people.
Yeah,
Sweet Canadian.
So, I couldn't get it.
How Tip Ryman of him.
I tried 3 times to get him my question. and I couldn't get it in the Isaiah Adams press conference because I don't like to clip the end of sound bites, and jump on over someone else's statement. But I wanted to ask him, I said, this front office is on the record as saying they're looking for, quote, grimy offensive linemen. Would you describe your play as such? I was hoping to get Buddy. He went into it anyway. So, yeah, that's we'll see. We'll see how things portend out on the field with Isaiah Adams. But, yeah, there's a number of guys who I think that we have to start a watch list for most likely to start a fight. Isaiah Adams would be in there. Xavier Thomas, maybe.
Well, see, now he seems
Tip Ryman.
Now,
okay, wait
Isaiah
a minute.
Adams
You
seems
can't
too
be.
nice.
You can't. What is it? You got Mo Hayes, and now you're just
Marquis,
now you're
Big
just
Mo.
Also, you're
Big
not
Mo.
allowed. You're
who's
not
gonna
allowed
fight.
to fight. We
Mo's on
learned
there.
that last year. It was L.J. Collier and who?
Elijah Wilkinson.
Right, got kicked
Yep,
out of practice
got kicked
right
out.
away.
Yeah, the walk of shame, all the length of the field and down the ramp. Thou shalt head to the locker room. So, but it's good. Okay, I'm going to go down on record right here.
Oh, here we go.
This
recording?
camp will be having much more of an edge. Will be a lot chippier than last year. I think you have personalities who, when you get to the dog days of camp, are more combustible, so to speak. I think there's much more heated competition for jobs this year for the final 53. It's not nearly as set as it was a year ago. And that's going to spark the ire of more than one person's temper.
Here's a good question. How many, and I'm not asking for names, I'm looking for a number right now. How many names do you think you'd be comfortable saying they will be on the 53-man roster?
Of the 90 right now?
No, well, you're going to, of the 53 that we end up with in September, how many would you feel comfortable saying? Like, would you say, could you name 40 people that you're like, yeah, these 40 are going to be on the roster? These 42 are going to be on the roster.
In other words, how many roster spots are up in the air? Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah, I guess so.
I would probably feel comfortable around like the 30 range.
30? Really?
You don't think that many?
I think it'll be more.
35? Oh, I was going to say maybe 30.
I bet you if I sat down, I'd be comfortable around 40. That's 13 spots.
That's an extreme number in most NFL camps. If you go into a camp
To have 13?
to have 13,
Oh yeah.
I mean,
well, that's why
I was
it popped
about
up.
to say 7,
Yeah,
and that's a lot.
That's what I'm saying, and I think it's probably more than 40 because in the number of times I've gone over the years, and it's like, okay, what are these camp battles? And usually when we talk about camp battles, there's maybe one starter, perhaps two. Most of the time, the camp battles are who's going to be backup or maybe a third string, and in terms of who's going to actually make the team, there's not that many by the time you get there because you construct with the idea that these guys are going to be on the team and everybody else is just window dressing. And I don't want to name names because it's not fair to the guys who you might consider window dressing at this point. But I mean, I bet you it's over. Yeah. I bet you if you really sat down, Dani, it would be way more than 30.
Probably.
All right. So here's the story that I can now share that happened at the end of last season. It was 24 hours after the end of the 2023 campaign and the season finale against Seattle, Week 18. And after the exit interviews, Monti Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon got all the rookies together in a room. And before they departed into their offseason, he had a message. And Monti Ossenfort, in front of all the rookies, said, "My job as a GM," and he paused for effect, "is to replace every one of you." And according to those who were in that room, you could hear a pin drop. For every rookie who might have thought, hey, I made it through my rookie season, my NFL career, it's about to launch, and here, this is the next decade of my life, not so fast. Instead of being that made man, you're going to be made to compete every year for a spot in this locker room. And I thought that's really telling as to the mentality and the culture they're establishing and the message they sent to everyone. And I think this offseason only reinforced that with 12 draft picks coming in competing. I mean, you mentioned Keitrell Clark. I'll just pull his name out of a hat. Here's a guy who at times last year, early in the season, was a starter as a 6th-round rookie. At the very least, you're thinking he's on this roster for numerous years to come, right? Not so much. Not after how they bolstered the corner room. How many are you keeping normally? 4? 4 corners normally? Maybe 5?
4 or 5, yep.
Depending on your versatility?
Yep.
Well, guess what? Sean Murphy-Bunting, Max Melton, Elijah Jones. Are we comfortable saying those 3 are going to be on the final roster?
I am.
So if you're Keitrell Clark, I mean, you resemble that remark from Monti Ossenfort.
Now, I will say that things are a little bit different these days, and it doesn't mean you can't get picked up if they release you, but because there's a 16-man practice squad, a lot of the names that are going to end up on that practice squad are guys that are going to be around all offseason. I would hazard 12 of the 16 practice squad members are guys that are on the roster right now. So when you're talking about getting down to 53, or maybe you're talking about picking up 1 on waivers or 2, and they are going to be 4th in the waiver claim line, I believe 4th. Yeah,
Yes.
4th in the waiver claim line, even though they're tied with some of those other teams. Let's say you get 1 waiver claim, so then there's 52, and there's still going to be a lot of guys that get quote-unquote cut that are still going to be around this team and potentially be on the roster at some point. But there's always a chance of moving on, and that's the other thing is when you start talking, and we'll be talking about this a lot more later, there are times, and this has happened a few times around when the roster starts getting built up in a good way. Not every year, but in some years. And then fans are like, oh my God, we have to cut X, or we cut Y. What are we doing? And I'm like, this is what happens though. When you get your roster to a good place, you are cutting a couple guys that you'd really rather not let go or expose to waivers to see if you can get on the practice squad. That's how it works. And that's how it's supposed to work. That means your roster is in a good place.
In fact, dare I say, if you want an indication how good your team is going to be that year, look at how many players you cut at the end of camp are picked up by other teams. If you don't have a single player picked up by another team, probably means you're not that talented and you're not headed for many wins. But if the guys you cut, a number of them are immediately snapped up by other teams and signed immediately, that means you got some pretty good talent in your room, in your locker room. So that's always a good indication and a good reminder. By the way, it's never too late to learn something in this game. Be honest, show of hands, how many people knew what an RVA session was before Jonathan Gannon mentioned it last week? RVA. I have no idea.
I mean, I didn't know what it stood for.
I didn't
Once
either.
you said what it was, I knew what it was, but
yeah.
I had never heard that acronym.
Routes versus air. Because he said Kyler Murray had the best routes versus air session he had ever seen.
I was willing to admit I didn't know it, and Dani wasn't willing to admit it.
No, he said raise your hand if you knew. I didn't raise my hand, which means I was participating.
Okay, so at least one camp battle once again has commenced.
What?
It's Dani versus Darren heading into. By the way, we don't know.
Did you get any diss tracks lately, Dani?
I don't want a diss track.
Yeah, you did. You said you wanted.
Not by you.
I didn't say it was by me. Did I
wanted one
say
by
me?
Kendrick Lamar or Drake or another beat by Metro Boomin. No, they haven't dropped anymore.
That's what my question was. I don't know why you're getting so defensive.
You guys are all wondering about the road trips and an international game. What you really need to figure out is the joint practice. That's going to impact your life more than anything. Where are you going for nearly a week in the middle of August? That's what you need to figure out.
Where are we going for nearly a week?
Isn't the podcast up?
Said by two people who apparently know, and I'm not in the know. Again.
I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah. So I'm about to shake them down right after we wrap up this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.